20 scandals the Discovery Channel tried to hide from viewers. Discovery Communications owns the Discovery Channel TLC as well as Animal Planet. These channels are supposed to be about discovery and learning, but instead the shows on these networks are riddled with scandal. Seems like the Discovery Channel is a magnet for convicted criminals, which often leads to the cancellation of a show in question. Many of these are obvious, but some aren't. Here are 20 scandals the Discovery Channel tried to hide from viewers. The star of Man vs. Wild was fired. Bear Grylls was the star of Man vs. Wild, and he did some pretty outrageous things to survive in the wild. He even went as far as drinking his own urine to survive. Bear was only interested in filming his show, so when the network asked him to participate in 2 upcoming projects, he refused. Rather than letting him stick to the show that made him famous and had high ratings, the network decided to fire him for being uncooperative. His show was on the air for 6 seasons, and Barack Obama was even featured on one of the episodes before Bear got the axe. The Alaskan Bush people aren't even Alaskan. Of all the Discovery Channel shows, Alaskan Bush People is probably the most controversial. Many people wonder if the show is even real. Turns out the family is not Alaskan, and their former home was located just 10 miles away from the center of town. Most of the family members, Billy, Bear, Bam Bam, Noah, Matthew, and Gabriel, they were all issued citations for making false statements when applying for their hunting and fishing licenses. They claim to have been born and raised in the wild. They really lived in Colorado and Texas. They didn't get their licenses until they moved to Alaska in 2012. The Alaskan Bush People lies continue. As if not being Alaskan wasn't a big enough lie, Billy Brown and Joshua Bam Bam Brown lied again. This time it landed them both in hot water. The state of Alaska has a fund called the Alaskan Permanent Fund Division. It gives residents thousands of dollars for being full-time residents. The 2 Brown men lied about living in Alaska, and they were given money from the state. Over 7 years, Billy admits to receiving $7,956, and Bam Bam collected just a little over $1,100, and they were both sentenced to 30 days in jail. American Guns cancellation. The Discovery Channel took advantage of America's firearms obsession when they debuted the show American Guns. The show revolved around the Wyatt family, who owned a custom gun shop called Gunsmoke Guns in Wheat Ridge, Colorado. The last episode aired in 2012. Despite the fact that both seasons had good ratings, the show was still canceled. Many people believe that it was canceled because of the Sandy Hook tragedy that took place in Connecticut. In 2012, a 20-year-old man named Adam Lanza shot his mother before taking her car and shooting up an elementary school. Teachers and students as young as 6 were killed. The Discovery Channel insists they did not pull the plug because of the shootings, though. They claim that they just didn't want to renew the show or show any reruns. Gunsmoke Guns was burglarized after American Guns cancellation. Shortly after American Guns was canceled, Gunsmoke Guns was burglarized. On February 27, 2013, a thief broke into the shop by cutting a hole into the roof. The cops weren't sure if the perpetrator acted alone or with somebody else, but they did manage to make off with 12 handguns and 13 rifles. It was the first round of bad luck for the family, but it would not be the last. Richard Wyatt never had a gun license. While the family was filming American Guns in 2012, Wyatt lost his federal firearms license for violating federal laws and regulations, although it was never specified which laws were actually violated. It made it illegal for him to sell guns, though. Despite the fact that he didn't have a license, he continued selling weapons through a straw federal firearms license that belonged to somebody else. The man who helped Wyatt was accused of changing the address of a store called Triggers to the address of Gunsmoke, even though he didn't own Gunsmoke or Triggers. When a customer bought a gun at Gunsmoke, they went to Triggers to fill out the paperwork. The man and Wyatt thought that that was a loophole, but they were indicted in 2016 for conspiring to sell guns without a license. Richard Wyatt failed to report $1.1 million of personal income. After the cancellation of American Guns, the hits just kept coming for Richard Wyatt. 9 days after the gun shop was robbed, IRS agents raided the store as part of an ongoing investigation of tax evasion. The investigation began in 2010 when an agent for the ATF heard that Richard was in possession of 6 fully automatic weapons. This is when the show was still on the air. When they looked closely into the shop's records, something just wasn't adding up. Richard was arrested for failing to report $1.1 million in personal income between 2009 and 2012. He was also charged with filing false tax returns. He was found guilty of 10 felony charges, including 1 count of conspiracy to deal firearms without a license, 9 charges of tax fraud and evasion, too. American Guns often dealt with pawn-happy criminals. As if there wasn't enough going on with the Wyatt family, Richard Wyatt also contributed to the sale of stolen firearms. In the last episode of Season 1, a man named Wiley Newton tried to sell an antique Colt pistol to the store. It was worth $20,000. The gun, however, had been stolen from a private New Mexico museum, and Wiley almost got away with it. Fortunately, somebody spotted the gun on TV and called police. Wiley was arrested and charged with the theft. The scandals revolving around the family just kept coming. Chris Ford and Stephanie Hayden from Sons of Guns were arrested. The Hayden family couldn't keep themselves out of trouble, which led to the entire family doing time. Stephanie Hayden's father was arrested and imprisoned for some pretty heinous crimes, and then his daughter followed in his footsteps. She and her husband, Chris Ford, were arrested for cruelty to a juvenile. Chris hit their 9-year-old so hard with a belt he had bruises on his backside. He was arrested, and when the boy admitted that his mother was in the room when the abuse took place, she was arrested as well. Cody London insisted that his dual survival co-host tried to kill him. Cody London and Joe Teddy were the 2 stars of Dual Survival, but they apparently did not get along. Cody filed a lawsuit against the network claiming that Joe tried to kill him while they were filming. Cody claims the producers wanted to make it look like he was losing his mind, but in reality Joe was waving an ice axe around threatening to kill him on a mountain in Norway. Cody says this was the 2nd time Joe threatened to kill him. The first time was in Hawaii, and Joe threatened to impale him with a spear while they were filming there. He also claims that Joe showed him pictures of people he killed while in the CIA. Naked and Afraid crew members help the contestants. The premise of the show has a man and a woman who are sent into the wilderness to survive for 21 days with no clothes. They're each given 1 survival item, and they have to make it out of there on their own. According to a female contestant, though, she got sick after eating a turtle, and the crew gave her bread, rice, beans, and baby food. She also received an IV drip so that she wouldn't become dehydrated. Since the woman needed this care to save her life, most people believe the show was not being dishonest about it. At the beginning of the show, viewers are told the crew will interfere in life-and-death situations, and the woman's condition was considered life and death. Naked and Afraid contestant makes claims about the validity of the show. In Season 3, Honora Bowen competed along with Matt Struzel in Brazil. Matt completed the challenge, but Honora tapped out. After returning home, she took to her blog to complain about the show. She claims to have been coerced to start an argument with Matt to make things more dramatic. She also claims the producers coached her to make statements about her background and also to make untrue claims about her father. She ended up tapping out due to heat exhaustion, but she claims that the heat wasn't actually the problem. She says that she had a bladder issue, but the producers refused to let her leave after she asked several times. So she faked the heat issue in order to finally be able to leave. Counting Cars. In 2012, a spin-off of Pawn Star called Counting Cars premiered. The show followed the stars buying, selling, and customizing unique cars at Count's Customs Auto Shop. The car expert from Pawn Stars, Danny Coker, is very knowledgeable when it comes to cars, and that helped him to land his own show. Unfortunately, the people who visited the shop weren't all that impressed. Many complained about the shop's sketchy location, and some complained that the merchandise was overpriced. Most of the people were underwhelmed. These poor reviews caused the producers to cancel the show. American pickers don't just happen to find treasure. Mike Wolf and Frank Fritz from American Pickers, they search the country hoping to find discarded items that turn out to be treasure. Along with their store manager Danielle, they find people who have junk for them to pick through. The show makes it seem that Danielle finds the people they visit and then the two men show up unexpectedly to go through their things. But that's not really the way it works. The producers are sent collections from collectors and they sort through everything to choose what's best. Only then do the two stars of the show examine those items. Frank and Mike are not as lucky as they appear to be when finding things. Pre-selected experts. If you've ever watched Pawn Stars, you know that Rick Harrison seems to have a friend who's an expert for just about everything. He actually doesn't know the experts that he meets, at least not most of them. The producers find the experts for him and then they bring them to the show. In most cases, Rick has never met the experts he deals with until they show up at the location. American Restoration isn't as skilled as you think. American Restoration's a Pawn Stars ripoff. The show follows the team while they restore old items back to their former glory. Unfortunately, they're not as good at restorations as the show makes it seem. During one episode, the crew was restoring a go-kart. A fan noticed that the wheels on the cart were crooked, which caused them to wobble. For the enormous amount of money that they charge to restore items, you'd expect them to be a little bit better at it. The cast of Pawn Stars don't work there. Pawn Stars follows Rick, Chum Lee, and the old man as they work at their pawn shop. Before the cameras began following them around, they worked at that shop every day. But when the show became popular, things changed. When they were at the shop after the show became popular, it became impossible for them to get things done. So because of that, the men only went to the shop while they were filming. The bickering on American Pickers is fake. We already know that Mike and Frank don't find the items that they buy on their own. The producers set that up. The producers also work with the sellers to determine a price. And when you see the men bickering with the seller on the show, it's fake. The men go into the sale knowing already how much money they're going to get for the item. That's done to add a bit of drama to each episode. Eaten Alive. For weeks, the show Eaten Alive claimed that Paul Rizzoli would be eaten alive by a giant anaconda. Well, when it came time for this to actually happen, the snake ate only his head, and then he was rescued by the crew. They claimed that the snake was going to break Paul's arm, and they had no choice. It was a huge letdown for the fans, and it made the network look bad. They also, unsurprisingly, had to deal with PETA after the airing of the show.